Great. Well, it's 12:04, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. And yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Claire Salerno. I'm the program coordinator for the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative, and I'm joined here by Diana Ferguson. Diana, if you want to say a quick hello.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Diana Ferguson. I'm a grants management specialist with the Agricultural Development Division. Happy you all could be with us today.
Yeah, so today we're going to share a little bit about our business enhancement grant, which, as many of you probably know, opened on Friday and will be accepting applications through November 20th. So we'll do a walkthrough of that program, and there'll be time for questions at the end. Elizabeth Sipple is the Working Lands Program Manager. She's not joining us today. I'm your main point of contact for any questions, but certainly we loop her in as needed. Yeah, so we'll provide a short overview of the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative and of the Business Enhancement Grant before the discussion. I think everybody is muted, but if you can keep your camera or your audio muted if you're not speaking, just to reduce background noise. You can use the raise hand function. You should see on the top right of your screen, there's like a whole menu of emojis. It's the third emoji from the left. So if you have a question, you can raise your hand there. You can put it in the chat. And I think we'll probably hold questions until the end. So yeah, you feel free to type it in the chat as it comes up. And we can answer it kind of as we go, but some of your questions might get answered later on in the presentation. But yes, at the end, feel free to raise your hand or simply unmute and ask your question. And before we get started, we are going to start the recording of this. So if you don't want to be seen in the recording, you can turn your video off. I believe we'll turn the recording off once the presentation part is done, so we won't record the Q&A portion. Oh, it's already recording. Okay, right? Diana, can you? Okay, perfect. All right, everyone knows they're being recorded. Great. So the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative was a program created in 2012 by the Vermont legislature. And the program manages and invests about $1 million annually into agricultural and forestry-based businesses in Vermont. In the 10 plus years of the program, about $16 million have been awarded to date. And this year, which is fiscal year 2024, there's $3 million available. And so the state fiscal year runs July 1st to June 30th. So we're in fiscal year 2024, which started July 1st of this year and will end on June 30th, 2024. So lots of different folks involved in the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative. The program exists for farm, food, and forest businesses in Vermont. Diana and I are housed at the Agency of Agriculture, Food, and Markets, but our program is jointly administered with our partners at the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, as well as the Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation. We are governed by the Working Lands Enterprise Board, which has representatives from all of the different working lands industries in Vermont. So whether that's logging, sawmill, dairy, non-dairy farming, livestock, marketing, all different elements of that. They sit on the board, as well as members from the Vermont Agricultural Assistance Corporation, the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund, and the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. And any grant applications that you submit are reviewed and awarded through a competitive review process, which is guided by those board members, as well as other industry, nonprofit, and government stakeholders from Vermont's working landscape. So for fiscal year 2024, we have some additional grant opportunities that, for those of you that maybe have applied before or know about the program, haven't been offered in past years. And we're here today to talk about the Business Enhancement Grant, which is available to apply for now through November 20th. There are some additional grants for businesses that may end up being a better fit for your business. That would be the Supply Chain Impact Grant or the ARPA Primary Producer Impact Grant, which will open in December. And that is a larger grant. So if you're looking for funds above the 50,000 max for the business enhancement, that might be one that you look at instead. And then we'll also have the Small Farm Diversification Grant opening in January, which is only for small farms. And that is if you're looking for funds below the 15,000 minimum of this business enhancement grant. There's also smaller trade show assistance grants available. So if you are someone that goes to trade shows to network and market with other wholesalers or businesses, that can be a grant that you look at, which will be available in winter 2024, not 2023, so in this coming January. So the timeline for the business enhancement grant application, the application opened and all of the information came out in what's called a request for applications on Friday, October 6th. Today is the 11th, we're having the webinar. And then the application is open until November 20th, which is a Monday, I believe the Monday before Thanksgiving at 8 p.m. And throughout the rest of November and early to mid-December is when all of the applications are read by at least 3 different people and reviewed according to the criteria that we'll talk about later that's in the that you'll see online, and the decisions are made towards the end of December, and you'll be notified in early January. And for those that are awarded, there'll be some documentation that we'll talk about that would be due mid to late January with an estimated project start date of February 2024. So the general eligibility for this grant, any organization or business applying must be based in Vermont and registered with the Secretary of State, which is a quite simple process to do if you haven't been able to do that if you're a newer business. So all structures are eligible, all types of business structures, whether that's an LLC, a sole proprietorship, nonprofits are also eligible for this grant. Your business organization must be in compliance with all state regulations and in good standing. So that means that you don't have for farms any like water quality violations or any tax violations or child care is something else that we see with our farm to school grants. See if I can just mute. And then for folks that have received a working lands grant in the past, if you received this same grant, the business enhancement grant, which used to be called the standard business grant, any year that you received that, or if you received the special COVID-19 response grant in 2020, you're eligible to reapply this year, whether or not you got that grant last year or 10 years ago. If you received one of the larger grants, so if you last year received the ARPA impact grant, if you received either of the supply chain grants from 2 years ago, also 2 years ago, there was a special grant for meat slaughter and processing. Those were a larger dollar amount, so you would need to wait 3 years until reapplying for any working lands grant. So if you received any of those grants in 2021 or before, you can reapply this year. If you received them last year or the year before, you still need to wait. And I'm happy to talk through that with anyone that has questions. So eligible applicants, this program targets working lands businesses in the farm and food and forest sectors. And we know that can be a little bit of a gray area if you are a food business and maybe not using products sourced from Vermont, same with a forestry business. So we follow most of the local food definition for Vermont. So if you're food processing business, if most of your product is coming from Vermont, or if it's not, but you're looking for the working lands grant to significantly increase your sourcing from Vermont and therefore kind of have that connection to Vermont's working landscape, you can apply. So the main question we often get is if your main product is like coffee or cocoa or coconut or some kind of ingredient that isn't produced in Vermont, but you are a local food business, we think that is wonderful. But unfortunately, there's not a direct connection to Vermont's working landscape, which is kind of the heart and ethos of this grant. So you wouldn't be eligible to apply, and I'd be happy to talk with you about connecting you to other possible grants that might be able to support your business. And it's similar with forestry businesses as well, that most of your wood should come from the Northeast. And the types of projects that are funded through this grant can be market development, so developing marketing or branding, materials, packaging. We see frequently if you're doing research and development, whether that's like market research or like product development type things. We probably see the most applications for infrastructure, so that could include new equipment, construction. So if you're building like a new area to house equipment or like a new processing facility, whatever that might be, it's probably eligible, as well as any supplies that are part of that. This grant can also cover any permitting fees that would be associated with new construction that you might be doing. And the last main category would be around workforce training and development. So any labor is eligible, or more, what we more often would see would be a training type program. So your main document and like source of information for any questions you have as you apply is called the request for applications. It's linked on the webpage for this grant. And what that is just a long document outlining all of the timeline, history of the program, eligibility, the award amounts that you can apply for. And then it has the full application printed out. So you won't apply for the application on paper. There's a web application that you fill out, but the RFA is kind of your go-to of here's what everything's going to look like, here's how it's going to be scored, here's everything I need to know. So it has the key dates, which we went over, the program information, the applicant eligibility, project eligibility that we just talked about, and then it has all of the questions that are in the application, as well as the grant reporting requirements if you're to be awarded, which we'll talk about in a second, and then the review information along with the scoring criteria rubric. So matching funds are a big part of the of Working Lands grants. And so typically Working Lands grants, including this business enhancement grant, expect a match of 100% of the grant request. So for example, if you apply for a $25,000 grant, you would match $25,000. So what that often means is that you're applying for grant funds for half of the cost of your project. And a grant can be cash match or a combination of cash and in-kind. And in-kind is really only donated supplies or services or volunteer labor. So your own labor or someone that works for your business, all of that is technically considered cash match that you can value at sort of the market rate for your labor. So we find that a lot of folks, for example, if you're doing a construction project or like purchasing equipment, like your time, if you have to drive somewhere to go pick up the equipment, or like you're spending time researching like the best one, or you're doing some of that construction or like excavation yourself, all of that would be considered match. And we're happy to talk you through any specific match questions that you might have. And if match is not possible for you, you can still apply. And the way that that works is you fill out the application, same as everybody else. When you get to the budget section, you would simply include only the amount of match that you can contribute to the project. So say you're applying for a $25,000 grant, you're like, we're going to do all this excavation, whatever, ourselves, but we can't provide any other funds, and that's going to be worth about $10,000. You could include that in the table, and you'd explain, there's an area below that where you would explain why the match waiver is needed at this time. Certainly we know that right now inflation is really high. costs are really high. So a lot of folks are not in a position always to contribute towards the project. So you can certainly explain that. I would say most often the projects that are approved that don't have a match, it's often something where a really big investment is needed to take that business to the next level. For example, if you are a slaughtering business and you're looking to make these upgrades to be in compliance to receive like state or USDA inspection, and you really can't move forward at all with your business until you do those upgrades, but you can't afford them with a match. That would be, I would say, a very strong example of when a grant would be approved without any match. But there are other examples as well. I think they're most often either when you need to make that big investment to get to that next level, and then you'll be very profitable, or if you've recently made some really big investments in your farm. For example, if maybe you just invested in another really important project that was like critical to your farm operations, but you have this next piece that you also need to do, and you're kind of maxed out in debt, that can be something you can explain in that application. So the scoring criteria, I believe, is on page 12, 13, or 14 of the request for applications. And definitely recommend that everyone take a look at the details of this on there, because that's how your application is going to be scored and looked at. So the two biggest pieces with the most points are around project impact and then business viability and financial management. So within the project impact on the application, there are a lot of different areas where you could explain that your project might have an impact on the acres in production or land management. It might have some climate impacts. It might have impacts on your workforce, whether that's making things more efficient or the workplace safer, creating jobs, whatever that might be. There's a pretty long list of areas that you can talk about impacts. You're not expected to have impacts in all of those areas. So you can select one, two, or three that you'll be most impacting through your project. The next piece is business viability and financial management. So explaining about the business viability and history of your business. You do have to submit documents, which we'll talk about in a second, showing strong financial management. So you'll submit a profit and loss statement and other financial statements to show business acumen and readiness to receive a grant. The next piece is quality of concept. So that's just making sure that your project's been thought through. It makes sense for your business. It makes sense for whatever it is you're trying to do. The demonstrated project need is something that the project you're proposing is important for your business. It's something you need to do to move forward. It might not be something that you're able to do through other means necessarily, or if you're working with other businesses to do this thing, it's something that kind of is maybe going to be a collaborative effort. Again, that's not required, but that's just one example. The goals and expected measurable outcomes. So for every project, you'll explain a few goals of what you want to do with your project. So for example, if you're like buying a new piece of equipment and that's going to help you, for example, if you're a sawmill, like produce a higher quality product or produce more of a product, you would explain that, I want to increase by this amount, or, reduce the like kind of seconds of a product by this much. It really could be anything, but we most often see those goals around efficiency or producing more product or increasing sales, but it's whatever makes sense for your project. The budget is mostly around making sure that your budget makes sense, that you've done research, especially if you're purchasing equipment or working with a contractor, that you have quotes so that you have a realistic sense of what the work is going to cost. It's not related to whether or not you can meet the match or not, or like the size of your request, as long as your request is within the 15 to 50,000 required for the project. So it's mostly making sure that the budget is realistic given the scope of the project. And then the last piece, which is new in the scoring criteria this year for those of you that maybe have applied in the past, is the engagement, equity, and equality piece. And this is outlined more clearly in the request for applications. But any impacts that your project might have to different marginalized populations. So that could be for farms if there's like a food access component, or addressing food security component to your application, or if something about your project is like improving the well-being of your workforce or able to employ like different groups of people. Again, happy to answer any questions specifically, and we're not expecting that every project is going to score all the points in all of these areas or necessarily have that engagement, equity, and equality component. Your project might be really strong in some areas and not as strong in others, and that's okay. We score numerically all of the projects, but there's also reviewers provide comments and talk through seriously each project, knowing that a number doesn't always sum up the strengths. So yeah, just know that as you're going through that you're not necessarily expected to check every single box, but you want to make sure as you fill out your application that you're thinking about these things as you're going through. And I'll pass it to Diana now to talk about some of the documentation.
Thanks, Claire. I'm Diana Ferguson. Nice to see you all or be with you all today. I have the lovely task of sharing the maybe less exciting components of the application process around documentation. And then in a few minutes, we'll go into a demonstration of accessing the application in web grants. So a few notes here around documentation required within the application. And we share these primarily so you're prepared and able to organize yourself in advance of starting the application if you choose to do that. The first one, the water quality compliance form, is embedded in the application. So all you need to do is click the link, fill it out, and upload it, scan and upload it. So, and this is basically just certifying that you as an organization are not out of compliance with any state of Vermont water quality regulations. And then we have several business financial statements that are specific to this grant opportunity. So the past fiscal year balance sheet and profit and loss statement for your organization. Most of you likely operate on the calendar year, so that would be January to December 2022, the last full completed year, and then also a current year-to-date profit and loss statement with projections through the end of the year if you have them. And as well, a projected monthly cash flow statement for the upcoming fiscal year. So if you follow the calendar year, that would be January to December 2024. Then we do have optional documentation. We recommend letters of support, one or more, if you're able to contact a community member, a fellow business, a business viability partner, any outside entity who can justify or demonstrate from their perspective the value of your project. That really helps the reviewers to see kind of a wider lens of your proposition and how it may have an impact beyond even what you're, or substantiating kind of the impact that you are proposing. And then additional documentation is just optional, as well as the letter of support, both optional. And that's just up to you whether you'd like to include documents that showcase the work that you've already done along the lines of preparing for your project. So if you've already begun outlining a work plan or have some project renderings or designs or drawings, or you have some cost estimates for work to be completed by contractors, or anything else you think that that helps to demonstrate where you are in your project planning phase. There is a place for you to upload those documents. There's up to 5 optional upload fields. So just a note on those so you can get prepared ahead of time, and then that will make it hopefully that much easier when you are actually in web grants completing the application. Next slide, Claire. Okay, so documents required for awarding. This is in the case that you are selected to become a Working Lands grantee. We ask for a current W-9 form from the IRS, which is a standard federal form. It must be signed in the past 6 months. So if you have an older copy that's 6 months or newer, you're welcome to use that. The certificate of insurance is also required, business liability insurance as well as auto insurance, with the exception of if your project involves no transportation of any kind, and then you and I can confirm that by email. Attachment C, the link provided there will take you to the insurance limits that are required as a grantee, which are standard for all state of Vermont grantees and contractors. So if you have any concerns about being able to meet those limits, you're welcome to visit that form in advance. And then, of course, your grant agreement will need to be fully signed by you and then countersigned by the state of Vermont in order for it to be considered fully executed. And at that point, your project would be underway and you can begin receiving funds. Okay, web grants. So some of you may be familiar with web grants. It is at the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets within the Agricultural Development Division, the primary grant-making platform we use for our grants and contracts. And so it's soup to nuts from the beginning of first working on the application through, if you're selected, awarding, and then grant management as far as making payment requests, submitting status reports. So it is your one-stop shop for online grant management. And I would say if you're planning to apply and have not already registered in the system, please go ahead and do that right away. It does take sometimes a day or two to reapprove each registration manually. So go ahead and visit this URL here and submit a registration. And then Claire, I will go ahead and switch over to my screen so I can share the web grants demonstration of how to access. Let's see, let me make sure I'm sharing the right thing here. Window. How to access the application in the system. So hey, bear with me for just a second. Okay. Before I go into the system, I'll say too, if you are an organization who is applying and you'll have multiple people perhaps working on the application, whether it's a colleague or an advisor or someone you just want to help proofread or whatever it may be, please have each person register separately in web grants, and then they can be added to your application so you can work on it from your own account. And that's so that whoever's working on it, we have their contact information in the case of needing tech support. And then down the line, when other components, if you're awarded, are taking place with reporting and payment requests, that we know who is operating in the system so we can get in touch with the correct person. So this is the home page. If you have not registered before, you can click this yellow button to register. If you've had, go ahead and enter your username and password. I'm going to use a test account just to show you the look and feel of getting into the system and accessing a Working Lands grant application. Things will look a little different, of course, because this is a test account, but you can see this is the dashboard you'll have your name up on the left, top left in black, and then your primary navigational buttons within web grants are these gray buttons on the left. You can click my profile, which is down here on the bottom, if you'd like to confirm your contact information or if it needs to be changed at any time. Maybe you registered a few years ago and you have a different email address or phone number or mailing address, and you can edit your profile easily here or reset your password to something more memorable than the standard one that you're issued when you register. So to get to the place where you're beginning an application, you'll go to funding opportunities, which is the second option here in this gray menu. And currently posted funding opportunities will appear. You won't see these red ones that are in test, but you'll see all the green that are posted, which means they're accepting applications currently. So I'm going to click anywhere in this bar here of fiscal year 24 Working Lands Business Enhancement Grant. And that will take you to kind of a landing page where if you scroll down, you'll see the funding opportunity details, due date, a few other particulars and links that will take you to our Working Lands primary web page, a link again to the request for applications, and several other places which are we think helpful to applicants. I do want to draw attention to this web grants application guide, step-by-step instructions for submission. That also, I've got that pulled up here. This is really beneficial for those of you who have not applied or completed an application in web grants before, or if it's been a while since you have. It takes you through step-by-step with screenshots of how to begin and complete and submit an application. We've found that people have a lot more success once they've gone through and have an expectation of what they're going to see, or if you just would like a refresher of what we talk about today. So that's your information. And to get started on the application, once you've read the request for applications, you feel ready to go, you can click this green Start New Application button on the right. And that will take you to a 3-step application wizard, which does feel a little redundant, being that it's 3 separate steps on the same page, but it's just essentially the system building the backbone of the application for you to complete. So you will give your application a title, and then as the primary contact, make sure your name is selected. If you have multiple folks in your organization, if you're going to be the person primarily leading the application, then make sure your name is selected and click Save Form Information, the green button on the top right. And that's step 1. And then your next step is to confirm that your organization is selected. And this is especially in the case that maybe you have more than one business operation or you're helping a friend. Make sure the organization who would be receiving the potential grant is selected here, and then save form information again. And then step 3 is optional. As I mentioned earlier, you can add collaborators on your application. So if you've had multiple folks register in web grants, everybody's ready to hop in and get to work. You'll click into this this box at the bottom, additional applicants, and anyone else who's registered in web grants under your organization will appear here. So you can add collaborators. And if not, you can just go ahead and save form again. And that is the last step to take you to your application forms. And you already have a nice bright red reminder that you can't submit it yet. Thank you very much, that you haven't begun. But the name of each application form appears here under application details. General information is just the system-based form which you completed, and then all the others starting with application information and on down are forms that you need to complete one by one. So I'll go ahead and open one for example. This one will take you to a standard or a global form that's used by our development division for folks who apply for any of our grants. So it's anything you see in red is required, anything in black is optional. So we ask you to continue scrolling all the way down. You can see that it's broken up into multiple sections, and at the end here you even have an optional demographic survey to complete. This form is new this year, so it's a little more in depth than your previous grant applications if you've done them in the past. But also note that this save form button on the right, whenever you are entering information, save form, it appears multiple times, but it does the same thing. So you can save the form from wherever you are working on. Whenever you are ready to complete the form, you will have the option to, let's see, I'll just enter some test information. Save form on the right. And that will kind of encapsulate and capture what you have entered at any one time. And then you've got this view only mode after you click save. And so you can see that I've entered test as my name. I can re-edit the form, and you can leave, come back, and do this as many times as you like throughout the whole application period. And once you're done with the individual form you're editing, you can click mark as complete, which is this orange button. It's going to tell me, of course, that I have not completed the form. So make sure you've filled out all of the form fields before you mark as complete. And then once you have actually marked as complete, I'm going to navigate back to my application list here. Then you will see oops, sorry, it's taking its time today. You'll see a green check mark under this complete every time you have successfully fully completed an individual application form. And so your goal is to have green check marks all the way down. Once you have achieved that, then this message, which is currently reading as an error message, will turn green and will say application is in compliance. And then you'll have an orange submit button appear up here at the top next to the preview button. But only once all of them have been completed and marked as complete, and you've got your green check marks, will that be an option. So you can return to this menu and click through each form individually to edit it. It doesn't matter in which order. You can start anywhere and navigate through any form at any time. Something I will point out is if you're editing and say I'm saving my form because I'm going to go have lunch, come back. Once you've saved it once and you're in this view only mode, you can of course edit it again. Or if you're ready to move to another form, instead of going back to that menu where we just were, you can see these blue abbreviated links that I'm hovering over. Each one is it's the same list of application forms. So rather than having to go back to the menu each time, you can click through each form and okay, I'm ready to go work on my goals and outcomes table. So I'm going to do that. It's really helpful at times to kind of be able to bop in and out of each form so that you're establishing consistency throughout. So that is sort of the primary application process. It does take a little bit of getting used to, so we recommend getting into web grants sooner rather than later, getting familiar with the lay of the land. Some folks like to read the request for applications and start composing their answers in a separate, like a Word document, and then copying and pasting them in all at once rather than doing your editing in web grants. It's completely up to you. Let's see if there's anything else to point out here. The water quality certification, as we mentioned, is second to last here on this list of application forms. And that's just, as we mentioned, a confirmation that you are in compliance with water quality standards. And then as you can see, I'm using the back button that's embedded on the page here. We have found that it will more often take you successfully to your previous page if you click this back button rather than the back button in your internet browser. And then additional attachments. I just wanted to point that out since we mentioned that in the presentation as well. Here are your optional attachment fields for if you choose to procure letters of support, letters of commitment, any other a business plan, a contractor estimate, anything else you might want to upload to give the reviewers kind of an expanded view of your project. So that's that. And I believe that sort of gives you the overview of working in an application in web grants. I'm available and in the system every day as part of my job. So I'm happy to answer questions if you get stuck, if you've read through the application guide and it's not quite making sense, or something isn't just functioning in the way that you had hoped that it would. I'm happy to talk with you over the phone or answer an email at any point. So you can also preview your application here, withdraw your application. So again, it's nice to just sort of get familiar with the system in advance of the deadline. It does take a little bit of time to get accustomed to it. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Claire unless we have anything pressing at the moment about web grants.
All right, thank you, Diana. So we have just a couple more slides and then we'll open it up for questions. And I did see in the chat, there were some questions about the timing of spending your grant funds or matching funds. And so I should have said this before. You can only use grant and matching funds on expenses that happen during the grant period. So in this case, that would start in February 24. You wouldn't be able to apply for a grant for something you're already doing right now, to then get retroactively funded for that, unfortunately. Certainly, if you end up needing more time, if you are awarded a grant and have to extend your grant period, or if you finish early, that's usually something we work with quite often, and is something we can talk about as that were to happen. Yeah, so just some resources as you complete your application, and we'll send these slides out to everyone, and they're on the main grant page. We have a list of frequently asked questions that you can visit if you have any questions, and we try to update that with new questions as they come in. We have a weekly newsletter that you can subscribe to. Some of you may already be subscribed to it, and we send out reminders about applications opening and closing there, as well as events and other grant programs in our agency also post information. So it's a pretty useful newsletter. There's a calendar of funding opportunities across the agency. I should also note that we have a separate water quality division in the agency. So if any of your grant programs are more around like water quality, reducing runoff with agriculture, there's a lot of other grant programs that are specific to that. So that's not something a working lands grant would cover, but you can visit this calendar to learn more about other grants for that. We also have links to a couple different business planning resources or a directory for services if you need help with general business development. We also, for this business enhancement grant, are trying something new where if you are planning to apply and you let me know by October 30th that you would like some extra support developing the concept for your grant, I'll just get some information from you, and we're able to match you with a business advisor through the Vermont Farm and Forest Viability Program. And they would be able to spend maybe like 1 or 2 hours, maybe a little more, depending on timing, talking through kind of the overall project concept with you and kind of like how to, the like big picture stuff of the application. They wouldn't be able to like sit down and just review your writing for a complete application or help you do like overall business planning. But Diana and I are here certainly to help you with any kind of questions about eligibility. I can talk through that with you or other just kind of understanding the grant process. And Diana's certainly available for web grants help, but we're not, to keep a fair process, we're not able to provide specific feedback on like any kind of drafts of your application or anything. But if you would like to be connected with a business advisor for some kind of big picture support on your application, you can email me by October 30th. I did just put my email in the chat, and that information is also at the top of the request for applications. We also have social media pages that you're welcome to follow us for reminders and updates. So some final tips for assembling a successful application, starting early if you can. All of you are here, so that's great. Hopefully you're ready to go. But yeah, certainly compiling any of those, maybe extra documents, financial pieces, or if you are going to use a letter of support, getting started on that now is great. If you have any partners working with you on the project, or if you are working with a lender to get a matching loan or something, getting started on that now. As Diana mentioned, registering in web grants as soon as possible so you can get familiar with the system or start working. The most important thing is to read the full request for applications, which, as I said, is that document that's posted online that has kind of your one-stop shop for everything you need. And as Diana mentioned, there's that handy web grants application guide, which has some screenshots going over what she talked about that you can look at. And you're certainly, some folks like to do everything right in web grants as they apply. Some people like to draft things in a separate document. That's totally up to you, but that's certainly an option. And yeah, you're certainly welcome to set up a one-on-one call with me. I've been talking to a lot of different folks over the past couple of weeks, and I'm sure we'll continue to do so until these grants close. So yeah, I'm definitely available. I'll put my phone number in the chat as well. I'm happy to talk over email, on the phone, or a video call, whatever you prefer. So yeah, certainly if you have questions about whether you're eligible or which grant to apply for, I can talk to you about that. There are also some additional one-time grants, not through Working Lands this year, for maple operations, as well as maple or meat and produce. So I'm happy to point you in the direction of those if they're a better fit for you. And we can certainly talk through that one-on-one. So yeah, mine and Diana's contact information is here. And with that, we'll open it up for any questions. And then I'm also going to stop the recording at this time.